This is Jerry Coleman, play-by-play voice of the Dothan High Wolves on 96.9 The Legend, and you're tuned into the Phillip Jordan Podcast.
What's up, everybody, and welcome in to the latest edition of the Phillip Jordan Podcast. I am your host, Phillip Jordan, and studio host and producer of Athlon football on 96.9 The Legend. Also with the Auburn Wire, Western College football, and occasionally some sports over at Wiregrass Daily News. And thank you for jumping in with me on this edition of the show. We're only doing one podcast this week. Got a lot of other things going on, so I have two interviews this week, so we're going to put them all on one show. Be a little bit longer than what last week's shows were, but still two great guests. This week on the pod, Bob Rose covers New Orleans Saints for Athlon Sports, host of the Bayou Blitz podcast. He will be joining me. We'll be talking all things New Orleans Saints. I had Bob on the show a couple months ago. As free agency kind of was dwindling down a little bit. Kellen Moore was hired, so we talked about that stuff with Bob there. We will look at the draft, obviously the Derek Carr news from less than 2 weeks ago when he announced his retirement, the impact. Tyler Shook, is he going to be QB1? Will it be some of the other guys? We'll talk about that. We'll look at the other draft picks, the supporting cast around the quarterbacks. And also we will talk about the schedule for New Orleans Saints. Then we are not done with the state of Louisiana. I'll be joined by Zack Nagy. He covers as the publisher LSU Tigers over at Sports Illustrated. So we'll look at the Tigers. We'll stay in that state of Louisiana, as I said, and we will look at year 4, Brian Kelly. Is there pressure? Now we have a 12-team playoff. Does he need to get LSU into playoff? Got Garrett Nussmeier coming back at quarterback. LSU's done a lot of work in the transfer portal this offseason, and so we'll talk about that and where he sees right now as we sit in mid-May. Where does LSU sit in his eyes for next year or this upcoming year when it comes to the season? How good can they be? And I think LSU could be pretty good just with everything they have coming back. What they've done in the transfer portal at receiver, even on defense, they've added some edge rushers to get after the quarterback. Harold Perkins coming back. They're rebuilding DBU there at LSU. I think the defense should be solid. Offense will be really good once again when Garrett Nussmeier coming back. So I'm high on LSU going into next year. I don't think they're talked about a lot, though, as we're getting geared up for the upcoming football season. But before we jump into those conversations, let you guys know you can find me in the podcast. Find me on social media at PJordanSEC. Podcast is available on all your podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. If you leave just 4 stars, you're just a straight-up hater. And, of course, on reviews, I read them on future editions as well. Trying to bring the mailbag back, probably starting next week. Also, check out the show over on YouTube at the Phillip Jordan Sports YouTube channel. Hit the subscribe button, hit the bell for all notifications. Please leave a comment on a video, and I'll also read those on a future edition. And as always, you can email me at sportstalkphillipjordan@gmail.com. All right, as I said in the open, we're all Louisiana on today's edition of the show, all Louisiana football. And now we're going to check in on the New Orleans Saints by way of Pittsburgh. And joining me is Bob Rose. You can check him out, New Orleans Saints for Athlon Sports. Also, check them out every week, I believe on Wednesday nights, the Bayou Blitz podcast for all things New Orleans Saints. And Bob, I appreciate you coming on.
Phillip, thanks for having me. I know we talk quite a bit off the air, so it's a privilege anytime I get asked to join you. So thanks for having me. Hope everything's going well down there. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm up in Pittsburgh by necessity. It ain't by choice. I'd be down there with y'all if I could be.
I know, and it seems like if something is going on with the Saints when I have you on, because last time it was right after Kellen Moore got hired. The worst kept secret around Super Bowl weekend was he was coming in, and now not even 2 weeks after Derek Carr has retired. And that's where I wanted to lead things off, just with the Saints, because I really just put you in a situation quarterback-wise. But just the retirement of Derek Carr, Did it catch you off guard? We knew there was a chance he could have a surgery, be out for the year. We knew there was an injury issue with him way before this happened, even going to the draft. But was the retirement a surprise for you?
Yeah, I didn't have retirement on my bingo card. And Derek Carr has been the source of a lot of drama, as y'all know, basically since the end of the season. I never felt like he was going to play another down for the New Orleans Saints. As they were going through the coaching hire, and once Kellen Moore was hired, I didn't feel Derek Carr was going to be part of the team. That feeling became much stronger, much more resolved when the news about Derek's shoulder came out. I believe it was just before the draft, and then it was cemented on night 2 when they selected Tyler Shuck in the second round. But I felt like that either the Saints were going to just put Carr on IR or the PUP list, and just tell him stay away for a year, and we'll release you officially at the end of next season, or that they were just going to cut ties with him and designate him as a post-June 1st release. Either way, the Saints were on the hook for Derek's salary this year, so that's one of the reasons why they reached the restructured deal that they could. But they were even by me feeling the Carr wasn't going to play another down for them. I still didn't have retirement on the bingo card. And I be honest with you, Phillip, I'm glad it's over. I wish Derek Carr all the luck in his next chapter of life, whether it's off the field, whether he resurfaces with another team in a year or two, which I wouldn't be surprised at that. I'm just glad that, once now that we have this Band-Aid ripped off and Derek Carr is no longer going to be a featured discussion between us and the media or you guys, the fans, he's been a Saint for 2 years and a couple of months, and it just feels like forever, doesn't it?
Yeah, when I was looking at it when he retired, I said it's 2 years. It feels like it's been much longer. He's been there. 14 and 13 as starter, it hadn't made the playoffs, and it feel like injuries have kind of been a story with him since he's been there with New Orleans. I know when he signed, there was a lot of excitement. Obviously, it was an upgrade at position over what what the Saints had before, after Drew Brees had retired. But it just seemed like it just never quite clicked consistently. There were moments. I mean, we talked last year; they were 2-0, 3-0. The offense looked great, everything was running great, and then the losing streak hit. So, is that kind of how you felt with it, or just kind of like how will you remember this 2 year on the field with Derek Carr?
I'll remember it as a puzzle piece that just didn't fit. I'm never going to say Derek Carr is a bad quarterback because I don't think he is. I never have felt like he's among the elite. But even coming into last season, and we debated this on our podcast, on our show, the Bayou Blitz too. Coming into last season, or even at the midway point, there were probably minimum of 12 teams, and you could make a case for up to 14 or 16 NFL teams that would have taken Derek Carr at quarterback. So I believe he's average to slightly above average, but it was never a fit in New Orleans. First of all, whoever does PR for Derek Carr, he needs to fire them, and hire a whole new staff. Derek, if you're watching, if you're listening, my phone number is right out there online. I'd be happy to give it a shot with you. Derek didn't do himself any favors. You're replacing a legend, essentially replacing a legend in Drew Brees. That's almost a no-win situation right then and there. And you're taking on, you're taking on that duty with a team in decline, with an aging team, with a team with a whole lot of holes. And, you and I have addressed this several times this offseason. So the talent wasn't around Derek to be successful. And then, like you said, you sprinkle in some injuries in there. He didn't miss any starts in his first year, but he was nicked up an awful lot. And it seems like his body is starting to break down, which is inevitable for an NFL player. It happens with all of them. I'll remember Derek as just a puzzle piece that didn't fit off the field, and bad timing. I think if you put Derek on this, on that Saints team like 3 years earlier, if Breeze would have retired earlier than he did 3, 4, 5 years earlier, I think this team is still a playoff team, NFC South champion, maybe a deep playoff run in them. So Derek's not a bad football player. Yeah, he wasn't a fit for what the Saints needed at the time, which was essentially a miracle worker at quarterback. And he's never going to be mistaken for any of the elite signal callers, not just in league history, but even in the NFL today. And like I said, Derek didn't do himself any favors with his off the field drama either, and just a very unrelatable person, for the fans, and that made it easy for the fan base to turn on him. In a way, I felt a little bit bad for him from that aspect.
Yeah, because obviously, as you mentioned, he's replacing technically Drew Brees, and the connection he had with the city, with the fans was, you can't. It's hard to compare with what Brees had, the connection with that community in New Orleans versus almost anybody else in their city.
Yeah, no doubt. And I joked about this on our show last week. We all know that Drew Brees is a computer on the football field. Off the football field, he's always been a PR machine. He knows, whether it's him naturally, his family dynamic, or the advisors in his entourage. He always knew what to say at just the right time, and he, as he ingrained himself into the Gulf Coast community immediately. And let's face facts: the entire region was looking for a savior, not just on the football field, but in general. Coming in post Katrina, Derek, fortunately for the region, Derek wasn't coming in that kind of situation. But Derek Carr could have and should have taken some lessons on, hey, how did Drew Brees kind of ingrain himself into the community? I'm not talking about going around on every single show and, kissing what, and, doing the politician, the politician dance, kissing babies and saying all the right things. But it just seemed like everything that came out of Derek Carr's mouth was the wrong thing at the wrong time. And then, to back it up with inconsistent, I won't say bad, but inconsistent play on the football field, that man was doomed.
Mm-hmm. I'll say this too about Drew Brees. Alabama fans are thankful that he picked the Saints, because had he stayed with the Dolphins had picked him up, Nick Saban probably never gets to Tuscaloosa. So
right.
I'll just throw that shot in, Alabama fans. Y'all know where to find me. P. Jordan SEC all over the page. The next quarterback. So you look at it, who they had coming back: Spencer Rattler, Jake Haener. We've seen those guys play. Look, you know what they are. You can also tell they need development. But then you draft Tyler Shook in the second round. He's almost as old as Derek Carr, so you got that. Just kidding, Saint fans. I mean, Tyler Shook. He was a player I think a lot of people probably thought after the college football season and going into the draft. That wasn't a name a lot of people nationally were talking about, but he moved up. 6 years in college football. Of course, he played first 3 years at Oregon, 2 at Tech, and then, of course, there at Louisville last year. Is he the guy that you think is going to be the starter day one for this team?
Yeah, I do. I do believe that there'll be a legitimate competition between he and Spencer Rattler. Spencer Rattler will have his chance to win the job, but you got to feel like that Tyler Shough is the heads and shoulders front runner right now, and that is basically his job to lose. And I say that because not because I'm sitting here saying that Shough is better than Spencer Rattler. That's a matter of opinion, but you have a new coach in Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore comes in. He handpicks his own quarterback in Tyler Shough. He's the one that drafts him. So you got to feel like Kellen Moore identified Tyler Shough as, this is the guy I want to run the system that I want to run in New Orleans. So Spencer Rattler will have a chance to win the job. But yeah, I got to believe that Rattler has got to play lights out, and Shough has got to struggle or show some inconsistencies for Rattler to overtake him by the season opener.
And always when you have a rookie quarterback, the supporting cast is always the most important part. Any rookie quarterback, I don't care if you're drafted first or in the 7th round. And you look at what he has around him: Alvin Kamara, but getting older. You do
Mhm.
have Chris Olave, who we have seen good things out of, and Brandon Cooks, who is, he's productive. He's a good veteran receiver to have. How do you feel about what the Saints will have around him offensively?
I like what the Saints have at the skill positions. What scares me is their lack of depth and lack of big-bodied pass catcher, that guy, that Michael Thomas type of guy to just dominate the intermediate routes. But Kamara, I still believe, is the most versatile back in the National Football League. You didn't even mention Taysom Hill or Jawan Johnson. They are good matchup weapons any team would love to have. Chris Olave, really good, really, really good receiver, underrated in my opinion. And I absolutely love watching Rashid Shaheed play football. But outside of that, I mean, you mentioned them bringing in Brandon Cooks. You got to question how much Brandon has left.
Yeah.
I know he could still fly, but can he stay healthy? And that's going to be the question with the other guys. We saw what this offense was when Olave and Shaheed went down in back-to-back weeks before the midseason point. It had to rely all on Kamara, and then Kamara got dinged up, and that offense wasn't going anywhere. So, your starting skill positions, I like. I think the Saints could match up with just about anybody on that level. But you gotta. I'm still worried about the depth there, and that offensive line has got to come together quickly. You need to protect your rookie quarterback. You need to protect any quarterback, obviously, but a rookie will more often than not take that extra half second to just process things. Might get rattled a little bit easier than an accomplished veteran. And you need to have balance. You got to run the football. You got to protect your quarterback. So the Saints better perform well up front as well.
Yeah, and they used their first pick in the draft with getting Kelvin Banks out of Texas. I know they didn't pick up Trevor Penning's fifth-year option there as well. Did not resign Lucas Patrick on the offensive line too as well. So this looks like also another guy. We talked about Tyler Shook, a guy that's just going to be featured with this team year one.
Yeah, and I know some people were disappointed a little bit in the Saints going offensive line yet again with their first round pick, but in hindsight we shouldn't have been surprised. Kellen Moore and Mickey Loomis both were telling us in the weeks leading up to the draft, we want to get bigger, we want to get more physical, we want to upgrade our trenches. Well, I mean, that's exactly what they did. With all of their draft picks. Every single one of their draft picks, except for the cornerback Quincy Riley, who is a little bit on the smaller side, all the other ones were among the biggest, more physical players at their respective positions. Even Shuck, you're talking about a 6'5", 224-pound kid. And then like you said, they targeted Banks in the first round. They beefed up their defensive line with Vernon Broughton in the second round. I expect that Banks will probably be the left tackle. At least that's their goal. And they'll shift Talise Fuaga over onto the right side, which is where he played in college. I personally don't like the less shuffling you have to do with your offensive line, the better. I've always strongly believed in cohesiveness with that unit, but you also want your best 5 blockers on the field, and Kellen has said as much as that since the pick of Banks. Banks may get, in fact, I think he will get a look at guard because, like you said, Lucas Patrick is no longer there. So they're looking for a starter at that spot. Maybe Banks takes that spot. They leave Fuaga at left tackle, leave Penning at right tackle. I expect Penning to get some reps at left guard as well. And don't forget that they did sign Dylan Radins, in free agency. And he's an experienced starter in this league as well. So I'm going to be watching the offensive line. What slots these players ultimately fit into.
I was looking who they drafted on the defense side ball. You mentioned it in the third round. He went defense tackle with Vernon, Broughton from Texas, linebacker Danny Stutzman from Oklahoma. And I look at that. You look at Cam Jordan. You look at DeMario Davis. Great players. Hall of Fame top players. Always going to be remembered by Saints fans, but they're getting older. And it also looks like you had to prepare for the future for when those guys are no longer there. What were your overall takes on, like I said, Broughton and Stutzman, those picks?
Well, And yeah, we just got done talking about how Derek Carr had to step in to an aging team, and who were those aging players? Cam Jordan, Demario Davis, Tyrann Mathieu on the back end. In 3 consecutive picks, they drafted Vernon Broughton, a defensive lineman. Now he's more of a tackle than an end, but you're still looking to fill a hole in the trenches. Then with another 3rd round pick, they drafted Jonas Sanker, the safety from Virginia, and then Danny Stutzman, like you said. I want to start with Stutzman because I absolutely love this pick. He's an old school throwback. You watch him play football. He worries me in coverage a little bit. He's not real agile, but he's got a good feel for when he drops into zone coverages. So I think the defensive coordinator Brandon Staley, I think he'll design different coverages where he's not asking Danny Stutzman to do what Demario Davis does and cover tight ends or opposing backs, sometimes even wide receivers man on man. That's not going to be Stutzman's strength. Stutzman is very, very good against the run. I mean, potentially elite. A very downhill, big, physical defender. Don't forget that this is a run defense that ranked 31st in the league last year. The Saints obviously knew this and wanted to address it. You get that big defensive tackle, you get Stutzman, and rest assured, Stutzman might be the heir apparent or eventual successor to Demario Davis, but he's not going to be taking in many snaps from Davis this season. I find it hard to believe that he's going to be taking a lot of reps from Pete Werner too. But Brandon Staley is going to find a very quick role for Danny Stutzman, and I expect Stutzman to make an impact for the Saints defense early and often.
Yeah, he had I was looking at, he had 4 games last year over 10 tackles or more, 15 against Houston, 12 against Tulane, 19 at Missouri, and then 16 versus South Carolina. So he was around the ball. So that's what you want with your linebackers. And you beat me to the punch. I was going to ask about Sanker at safety because I know they bring in Justin Reed, who was with Kansas City. Tyrann Mathieu's there, but Mathieu's another guy. With this Saints defense, good, still productive, but aging player.
Yeah, and Sanker. I saw the logic behind the pick. Me personally, I didn't like the player. I don't like what I see in film coverage-wise. I like my safeties to be able to cover. I like my safeties to have range. Jonas Sanker does neither one of those well. And this is draft analyst Bob Rose talking now. I could be wrong. I certainly hope I am. And obviously the Saints disagree with my assessment, having used a 3rd round pick on him. A few picks before, Xavier Watts from Denver. Xavier Watts from Notre Dame, a guy that Marcus Freeman, one of their new defensive assistants, coached and recruited early in college. So I think that's telling how they feel about Sanker. What Sanker's strengths is, again, big physical player. He's an in-the-box safety. Think Roman Harper in his prime. Think Malcolm Jenkins towards the end of his Saints career. Those 2 guys you didn't want in coverage. You didn't want in a single high safety role, because they were frankly a liability. But when it came to open field tackling, when it came to taking on big tight ends, when it came to moving a guy down in the box and giving your defense an extra run defender down close to the line of scrimmage, that's what kind of role I think Jonas Sanker is going to have with this team. And that's if that's the role he does play, and if he does exceed at it like he did at Virginia, that will benefit this Saints defense, because now you can move Justin Reed around, you can move Tyrann Mathieu around. Too often the last 2 years, we've seen Tyrann Mathieu down in the box. Maybe early in his career that worked. The last couple of years it has not. Tyrann Mathieu at this point in his career has no interest in taking on those linemen and big backs as they're coming downhill at him. You want Tyrann Mathieu. Tyrann Mathieu's strengths are coverage, reading the quarterback, off the ball responsibilities, and Justin Reed, a similar player. Now you can do that with those guys if Jonas Sanker is that in the box safety that you coveted.
When you look at the schedule, we're not going to go game by game, but no prime time. I was surprised no Thursday night football because that was one. And especially, I mean, there's been years where the Saints and the Falcons weren't good, but they still were throwing them on against each other on Thursday night football. None of that. So hey, but I guess though when you cover the team, Sundays is kind of the deal. No prime time, have to worry about that. But combined with the schedule, just how we just talked about this team, success for 2025, the upcoming season. Of course, I think a lot of people will be looking at obviously rookie quarterback, rookie head coach. When you look at as a team you cover and pay attention to this team, ins and outs of it, what do you view as success for the New Orleans Saints in 2025?
A couple things. I don't think that this is a playoff team. Just glancing at the roster right now, but as a competitor, as a former coach myself, I'm always looking for ways to get my team into the postseason. And when you look at the schedule, you can't help. I mean, it's all human nature. We look at the schedule and we think, okay, that's a probable win, that's a probable loss, 50-50 here and there. I think at the end of the day, I believe anyway, I certainly hope that the Saints front office is going to have patience with Kellen Moore and hopefully they're realistic about their own postseason chances. Is the opportunity going to be there? Yeah, because I actually don't think that this is a particularly strong schedule. But a successful season for me would be that the Saints are pretty competitive with everyone on their schedule week in and week out, and that you're a better team at the end of the year than you are at the beginning. That shows progress, that shows development, and that likely means that A, your veterans held up for at least one more year, but B, you got some progression out of these young players. And maybe gives you a brighter glimpse for the future.
It's going to be interesting because when you see a young team, especially with the quarterback, that's going to be the eyeballs. And what can Kellen Moore be as a head coach? He's been very successful. I thought he was really good with the Cowboys offense coordinator. I know that was a scapegoat type deal with there, and then obviously what he did with the Eagles. So it's going to be fun. And Bob, this is fun as always, talking all things Saints with you. If the listener viewers want to catch you online, where can they find you?
Thanks for having me on. Like I said, I always honored that you ask, and a privilege to join you every time you do. But folks, you can follow me and my work. I post all of my articles and my show links on my personal social media, which is Bob Rose on Facebook, at Bobby R2613 over on Twitter. For the time being, I am also predominantly writing for Athlon Sports and the Inside the Saints section. So you could check out those articles over there as well. And we're not going to have one this week because my co-host Brendan Boylan has the nerve to have his first honeymoon. So we're going to take the week off. But check out our weekly show. It's called the Bayou Blitz. We do typically like to run live on Wednesday nights. Every now and then we have to shift a day or two because of scheduling conflicts. But you can catch the Bayou Blitz. I post those links again on my personal social media. But you can sign up for updates on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your favorite shows. And in doing so, you could also catch some of our past interviews and past activities.
All right, everybody, go check it out. Go check out the Bayou Blitz podcast. Go check out all of Bob's work. And Bob, appreciate the time, and I look forward when we get to do this again.
Can't wait to do it. Be well, my friend. We'll talk soon.
All right, everybody, next up. Now we are going to leave New Orleans and head to Baton Rouge, where we're going to talk about the LSU Tigers football team I'm very high on after doing my research. And joining me that knows all about this team, Zack Nagy. Check him out, SI publisher for LSU on Sports Illustrated, also Ole Miss on Sports Illustrated as well. But we're just here to talk about the LSU Tigers. And Zack, appreciate you coming on to break down these Tigers.
Yeah, man, I'm excited to talk about it. Obviously, we're heading into May, heading into the summer months, wrapped up some spring camp. A lot to talk about. We got some newcomers. We got some returning players, a unique blend of talent on this roster right now. So we got a lot to talk about with the Tigers. Obviously, you're high on them. I don't think you're the only one. I think we're starting to see some national media outlets get extremely high on the Tigers as well. So excited to dive into it, kind of break down what I saw during camp and see what we're working with LSU this season coming into 2025.
Yeah, it's always for me when May hits. Okay, it's time to start previewing teams. It's time to
Yep.
start looking ahead because if you do the thing just week by week, especially with 16-team conference and other teams throughout the country, you got to start doing it in May. I'll just say this from a standpoint is, of course, everybody can see on the screen if you're watching. I cover Auburn for the Auburn Wire. I don't like that Auburn and LSU don't play. Look, I know that there were sacrifices had to be made when they get rid of Division 16 teams, only play in 8 conference games. But I don't know about you. After 1 year, I missed the Auburn LSU game.
Yeah, I do as well. I think when we saw that there was going to be this new kind of obviously transition period with an expanded SEC, you're going to lose out on some of those quote unquote rivalry matchups and whatnot. And LSU Auburn is ultimately one of them this year that we saw kind of not transpire. So it's a shame. We'll see what happens in the future with the scheduling aspect of things, but to not have it in 2025 obviously is one where you kind of sit back and you're like, well, dang, I wish we could have had that one this season. But nonetheless, we'll see how this transpires. I think we're going to have some cool matchups moving forward.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I just think it's a rivalry in the SEC. I think that's had some of the craziest, wildest circumstances in games in the history of the SEC. I know it's not at the top of the rivalries, but it's one of those where there's been so many memories made between the two
not
teams.
to cut you off, but man, it's up there. Like I remember my first LSU game that I went to as a fan. Oh man, it was maybe 5-ish years ago. Maybe a little bit less. And it was Bo Nix in Tiger Stadium. He made that play where he basically ran circles around the entire LSU defense, went to the left side of the field, and threw an absolute dot for a touchdown. So for me, I sit back and I look at the Auburn and LSU matchups that have a bunch of rich history. But one that I certainly wish was on the schedule in 2024 and moving forward as well.
Yeah, I'm going to date myself on this one, Zach. I turned 16. It was Nick Saban was the head coach at LSU. And my dad made sure that we got Auburn LSU tickets that day. Here was the backfield. Auburn had Jason Campbell at quarterback. Just shows you how old I am for the audience out there. But yeah, I've been to 2 Auburn LSU games, and it's a great time with those two. But let's talk about this upcoming team, 2025. As I said, I was looking at the team. I'm high on this team because I feel like in the SEC, I think the consensus when we come out of SEC Media Days will be Texas as the favorite. And, of course, Georgia's going to be up there. And I said this with other people. I think Georgia's got a lot of questions, more than they've had in previous years. And when you look at LSU with what they got coming back and what they're bringing in from the transfer portal, this is a team that is a playoff caliber team. But as we say all that, we're going into year 4 of Brian Kelly. That was a big splash hire, getting him from Notre Dame. Again, 29-11, 2 10-win seasons. Last year, 9 wins. They have not made the playoffs yet. And look, I don't know how it is with LSU fans, but I could kind of see it. They look at, okay, the team he left has played for a national championship. When is Brian Kelly going there? Because that's why he left Notre Dame, is to win national championships and play for them at LSU. So I ask you this. He's been very successful at LSU so far, and this is a long way of getting to the question. Is there pressure on him going into this season, year 4, to get LSU to the playoff?
Yeah, I think ultimately what it comes down to is I think pressure is an understatement. I think when you look at these last couple of seasons and whatnot, yeah, you got those 10 wins, but that's including a bowl game. You know, these are 9-3 teams. These aren't the most successful teams that we were used to. The LSU standard's high, man. It's always going to be like that when you're in Baton Rouge. So ultimately what it comes down to is, yes, the expectations are high. It's a college football playoff or bust season in 2025. I think national media outlets are saying it. You're obviously, the fan base is getting impatient. Brian Kelly said to judge him kind of on that year 3, and some people are judging him pretty heavy on that year 3. So now you fast forward to year 4, and you've reconstructed this roster in a just a supreme way. You bring in 18 newcomers through the transfer portal. You return Garrett Nussmeier. You return Harold Perkins. Whit Weeks obviously comes back as well to gear up for that junior campaign. So you have a bunch of talent on this team. Like we were saying before, it's kind of a unique blend of returning players and, of course, newcomers. So the heat's definitely on Brian Kelly. I think that there's pressure there for him to ultimately get over the hump and make the college football playoff. I'm not going to sit back and say it's a natty or bust type of year. Obviously, you got to take steps in order to get there. And the first step for them is to get over that first hump and get into the college football playoff. And I think you have the roster to do it. The pressure's on. He's feeling it. Obviously, the fan base is putting it on him. The national media outlets are doing the same by kind of hyping him up as they should be. So, yeah, and my long-winded answer would be yes, it definitely pressure's on, man. Pressure's on.
And, and you look at it too with year one did him no favors in a way, because you beat Alabama, you get to the SEC championship game, Jaden Daniels, you had everything going for you. And then, so year two was going to bring on that pressure. And, again, you talk about 10 wins but a bowl. But so year one for Brian Kelly did not do him any favors either, because that first year, I think a lot of people were kind of like wait and see that first year. So let's see what it looks like with Brian Kelly. And then you have that successful year. Then after that, okay, the next step is the playoff, is a national championship.
Yeah, and I think you're spot on. I'm not going to say exceeding expectations is a bad thing, but nonetheless, when you go out there and obviously you punch your ticket to the SEC title game in a year where obviously expectations were not as high, it was going to be a transition year. You have a new quarterback in Jaden Daniels, a new look roster. Obviously, Brian Kelly inherited 35-ish players for that season. So you didn't have a team that was expected to be too successful coming off of a roughly 6-win season. So the year before. So nonetheless, he did. He exceeded expectations, and for better or for worse, it set the table for what LSU fans want to see. Like you said a couple minutes ago, Brian Kelly left Notre Dame because he wanted to win national championships. And now you fast forward to year 4, you haven't quite made the college football playoff yet, and you've retooled this roster. You've put money into this roster, and now you want to get that ROI, that return on investment. So we'll see what ultimately happens here, but I'm like you. I'm going to sit back and say that I'm pretty high on this team. It's not a homer take. I know I cover the team, but I have high expectations for what this team can do in 2025, just like the rest of them.
I don't think it's too much of a homer take. Now, if I came up here and I think Auburn's going to be in the college football playoff, then everybody can say, Phillip, sit down. You're being a homer. That's the team you cover. But it all starts with quarterback, Garrett Nussmeier coming back. I know, and there were some talks toward the end of last year. And I don't know how much you listen to Todd McShay. He's very high on Garrett Nussmeier as a guy that could, as a pro prospect. And you see now in the mocks for 2026 NFL draft, he's high up there. He's one of the top quarterbacks coming back to college football. Threw for over 4,000 yards last year, 64%, 29 touchdowns. It had the 12 interceptions, but you have a guy now. That was his first full year as a starter, and I think that's a terrific year. Just looking at from that side of year one. But when you look at Garrett Nussmeier going into year 2 as the full-time starter for this LSU team, what are you looking for in improvements with the quarterback?
Yeah, I think it's decision-making. I think that's number 1 on the list. And if you were to ask him, he'd probably say the same thing. The arm talent's off the charts. We know that he can make those tight window throws and make those quote-unquote NFL throws that obviously decision-makers are looking for. But keeping it in the college game, Brian Kelly and this coaching staff also want to see him continue to evolve with. The throws are there, the arm talent's there, the decision-making is where you ultimately want to see him start to be a little bit smarter with the ball. We saw what happened at Texas A&M, the game that kind of unraveled what transpired for the rest of the season. It wasn't necessarily perfect. So keep it short and sweet. It's the decision-making. We know what Garrett Nussmeier can do, man. There's a reason why he's in these top 5, top 10 conversations in the 2026 NFL draft, and you have some people already kind of saying, well, this is a guy who's in the number 1 overall pick conversation too. So he's a guy that has those lofty expectations as well. Year 1, he was solid, wasn't perfect, but now he has a receiving core that's much more, I would say, talented. I think it's much more talented. Last year, your wide receiver core wasn't necessarily as strong. You didn't have that go-to guy like a Malik Neighbors, a Brian Thomas, etc. But now you got a Barian Brown, Chris Hilton, Aaron Anderson, Nick Anderson. I mean, I can go on and on. Kyle Parker. You could probably list 6 or 7 receivers that can go out there on any given Saturday and produce. So he's got an embarrassment of riches, and we'll see how he maximizes it. But expectations are high on Nussmeier, as they should be. And I think to kind of bring things back to where we started the question is it's decision-making. That's where he can improve his game, and I think that's where he can reach the next level of a quarterback in Baton Rouge.
Just talking about the LSU quarterback position as a whole, something I've liked that Brian Kelly has done, he's had a backup quarterback on his team that he knows can come in and play SEC football. Last year he had A.J. Swan, that he was there as a backup. And look, A.J. Swan had moments of Vanderbilt, but at least it's a guy that's played in the league. He can handle himself. And now you're bringing in from Mississippi State, Michael Van Buren, a guy I think did some good things for Mississippi State last year. on a team that had its struggles. What was your take overall on him coming into LSU as to be the backup?
Yeah, I think the addition of Michael Van Buren is one that needs to be a little bit more hyped up, in my opinion. Just like I think getting Garrett Nussmeier back to Baton Rouge needs to be hyped up too. I think a lot of people just expected it. It wasn't one that was expected. You had to work out a lot of things behind the scenes to get Nussmeier back in the mix, and now you add Van Buren to that quarterback room, and you're too deep on that depth chart is extremely solid. This is a guy who had that starting spot at Mississippi State heading into this season, and he knows he's coming to be a backup. Like, he was willing to come back and learn. And I think that's a testament to offensive coordinator Joe Sloan. He's the quarterback's coach too, but I think it's a testament to his recruiting efforts and what he's done to really help players become better from a developmental perspective. So to get Van Buren in the mix is fantastic. He's a dual threat guy, extend plays with his legs. We saw him shine against Georgia. Obviously didn't get the result that you wanted, but he showed flashes of what he can be as a true freshman in the SEC. And I think the quarterback position is obviously one of, if not the hardest, to kind of grow as a true freshman and be thrown in the fire. So for Van Buren, he's a guy who has that SEC experience, comes in, can learn from Garrett Nussmeier, learn from Joe Sloan, and really set the table for the future of the quarterback room in Baton Rouge. So a big-time addition for them to go out and steal him from Mississippi State.
You brought up the receivers, a few minutes ago. Of course, you got Aaron Anderson and Xavier Thomas coming back, two super talented guys. But then Barry Brown coming in from Kentucky. I'm really excited for him because he's going to actually, for the first time, I guess when Will Levis was there, have an actual quarterback that can throw and get him the ball. I mean, that's a guy that can take it to the house at any moment. And then Nick Anderson, we saw what he could do his freshman year in 2023 for Oklahoma. Obviously, last year he missed a whole year with an injury, like I think over half the Oklahoma wide receivers did. Those two coming in with Aaron Anderson and Xavier Thomas, you're right. This is a foursome at receiver. You can see all four of these guys in the NFL eventually.
Yeah, I think the receiving core is just uber talented. The talent jumps off the page, and obviously it starts with those two newcomers in Barry Brown and Nick Anderson. I think Barry Brown is an absolute Swiss Army knife who can do anything that you need him on the football field. He leads the SEC all-time in kick return touchdowns with 5. He's sensational in the return game. And then you also look at what he can do with the ball in his hands in space. He's a freak. I mean, plain and simple. He's a speedster. He's quick. He's twitchy. He's fun. And I think that unlocks a nice element for this team, a guy that can blow by defenders in the secondary and get open as a vertical threat. And then you look at a guy like Nick Anderson. That's your kind of physical wideout that can go up and get any ball that you need. You need him to get healthy. Obviously, he's missed some time during his college career with injury, and he's still working his way back. During spring camp, he wasn't 100%. They're kind of working him back into the mix. But by the time the season rolls around, the expectation is that he'll be 100%. So you pair those two newcomers alongside the likes of Chris Hilton, Aaron Anderson, Xavier Thomas, and Kyle Parker. It sets the table for Garrett Nussmeier to have an embarrassment of riches to work with. And like I said, man, if he can maximize that talent group, it's going to be a pretty fun season for LSU in the passing game because Nussmeier can make all the throws. And then you got some receivers that can go up and make the plays too. It's a recipe for success, man. They've got a lot of talent to work with.
And then, of course, I think, you look at tight end, Mason Taylor off to the NFL. Yep. You bring back Trey Green. But there's another tight end I want to ask you about. And this is a little bit of favoritism coming from my side because I covered this guy doing high school football out here in Dothan as a quarterback. Bauer Sharp coming in, transfer from Oklahoma. Of course, when he went to Southeast Louisiana, he went as a quarterback, turned into a tight end. So now you got capable players at that position. And when you've got receivers like they have, that's just going to open up the middle of the field for the tight ends to make some big plays. Yeah,
Phillip, I think when you look at Bauer Sharp, and I hate to I hate to say this because now we're agreeing a little bit too much on this team, which maybe the listeners want it, maybe they don't. But when it comes down to it, Bauer Sharp was my winner from spring camp. He showcased it all. His skill set's so diverse. He's so fun to watch. He's dynamic, and he can really do it all for you. He has really soft hands to make the play in the intermediate routes. He can be a safety net in the short-term gains as well, which you need. And then he can put his hands in the dirt and block. He's so physically imposing on that field. So when I look at a guy like Bauer Sharp, my winner from spring camp, and has SEC experience, obviously led Oklahoma in receptions and receiving yards a season ago. Not that says too much. Like we were talking about, they were kind of depleted at receiver, so you had to fall back on guys like Bauer Sharp. But nonetheless, he showcased that he can be a threat in the receiving game. And then you pair him next to Trey Green, who's just an absolute phenom. What, a 6'6", 245-pound menace who can go up and really be that wide receiving threat at the tight end position. They complement each other extremely well. Trades is a guy who can make the plays with his hands and be that receiving threat. And then you got a guy who's experienced and savvy and Bauer Sharp who can teach him a thing or two and also become a blocker and peel off and make the short plays as well. So I think you'll see a lot of 12 personnel this season. I think the tight end position is one that they feel extremely comfortable with. They also went and added Texas A&M's Donovan Green too. So you're strong in that area. You're strong in that room. And Bauer Sharp's one that I'm extremely high on. But of course, it's Trades Green's job to lose. This is a guy who they have just tremendous expectations for. A really strong spot right there in that room.
So a funny story. So of course, Bauer Sharp graduated high school from Dothan. That's where he went. Mm-hmm. But before that, he was at a smaller high school in the area. And I got to cover their spring game as a photographer. And, you know, when you're down there being a photographer, they're a lot further away than you appear. Yeah. And then there was one time I pulled the camera down. I kid you not, Zach. Him and some offensive linemen were headed my way. Look, I'm a little bit out of shape and everything like that, but you trust me, you learn how to move pretty fast on someone that big. Even then, when he was playing quarterback, you saw the athleticism and, you know, just the size of Bauer Sharp. So, you know, what you said there is 100%. And I'm just having like some PTSD over here just from, you know, almost getting taken out by Bauer Sharp on the sideline. So, you know, if he's listening to this, hey, I think he's going to do great there at LSU. And I want to tell everybody this. I am not just pumping up LSU because Zach is here. I am 100% behind this team. Defense. Again, they went at edge rushers. And I look at Patrick Payton from FSU. He was a big part why this team was so successful in 2023. 7 sacks. Didn't have as much last year with 4, which, you know, everything went bad for Florida State there. But LSU's done a great job, too, here at adding edge rushers, getting after the quarterback.
Yeah, I think that was a position of need for this team, and they hit it out the park. I think when you go out and you get guys like Patrick Payton from Florida State, who's obviously one of the most coveted players in the portal as a top 10 transfer, you go out and get a Jack Pyburn from Florida who produced at the SEC level already, and he's just a menace on that field. He does it all. He's a jack of all trades. He's quick, he's twitchy, he's strong, he's fun. He can really do a lot of different things. And then Jamari Butler, he's a sleeper from Nebraska. This is a guy who has produced. He's made some big plays and a guy that they're high on as well. So you add those 3 newcomers alongside returning player Gabriel Relaford, who's coming back for a big-time season. It sets the stage for that 2-deep depth chart to really just have a tremendous mix, a really nice rotation. I don't think you're going to have maybe that one key guy that you had last year like you had in Braden Swinson. I think you have 4 guys who are going to rotate in and out and give you big-time reps when you need them. So it's a solid room. Obviously, you know, you got a bunch of players to work with, and Patrick Payton's the headliner, of course, on paper. But this room's talented. You have a lot of guys that you can work with here, and I think that's going to be a fun spot to watch working into fall camp, just to see who continues emerging as those 2 starters out on the edge. And then you get into week 1, week 2, week 3, and start to see what type of rotation they work with, because LSU season starts off hot. I mean, that September slate is brutal. So you're going to have guys that are ready. You don't have time to adapt. So excited to see how the edge room kind of pans out. Talent kind of jumps off the page when you look at it.
And I think a lot of people interested in LSU are going to look at this, the return of Harold Perkins, the injury from last year. Just from what you've been able to see coming from spring and what you've been hearing, you know, after all the spring practices, how is he coming along with his return?
Yeah, so during spring camp, he would be kind of working out on the sideline and just working through his rehab, going slow and steady, but really advancing. And then now he's kind of fully cleared for the most part. During June is where he'll really be fully cleared and ready to go for summer conditioning and workouts with the team. So the goal all along was to have him ready for June, but now it looks like he's moving pretty well already as he continues kind of closing out that rehab process following that torn ACL that he suffered last season. So Harold Perkins is ready to go. He's going to be working in that star role, which is kind of a hybrid linebacker safety. It gives him the opportunity to be play in space, but also get up closer to the line of scrimmage and wreak havoc in the backfield. So Blake Baker thinks that that's where his bread and butter will be. We'll see what ultimately happens in 2025, but they are really high on what he can do at that star spot. Rehab's going well. He looks the part. Excited to see how he does during conditioning. Of course, it's going to take some time. And then fall camp, once we get a firsthand look at what he can do on the field, just to see how physically imposing he is back out there on the field again, I think it's exciting. But Perkins is advancing well. He looks good. And now it's just about finishing those last touches of rehab.
And looking at just the schedule for LSU coming up this year, you mentioned at the top, you're at Clemson opening up the battle of who is Death Valley, the Death Valley teams. That Florida game week 3, because I think Florida is going to be a team a lot of people are going to be excited about just because how they played second half of the year. DJ Lagway, super talented quarterback. I look at Ole Miss, but hey, Jackson Dart, we'll see how they are. Of course, the Alabama matchup is always a big time experience. And then, of course, at Oklahoma, who I think will be better, and A&M's in there too as well. When you look at the schedule, and I think I asked you this last year when we did LSU preview. Obviously, the playoff is the expectation for this team, but record-wise, and I know we're in May, but if you look at it now, what do you think would be a reasonable win number for this team?
Yeah, I think the sports books have them at about 8.5 wins right now, whether you're looking at FanDuel, DraftKings, etc. I think they're setting the bar at 8.5. I think 9 wins is obviously the minimum. So me personally, I'm not necessarily a betting man, nor do I give betting advice, but I would say 9 wins is the floor. I would be surprised to not see them exceed that. So I'd say 9 or 10 wins. I think that's where you're sitting at comfortably. Week 1's going to tell me everything, man. I mean, it's been a brutal week 1 stretch for Brian Kelly during his career in Baton Rouge so far. So this is one of, if not the biggest games of his career, in my opinion. You go and you play against a Cade Klubnik, who I think is one of the best signal callers in college football. I'm excited to see the jump that he makes. So 2 quarterbacks that obviously are returning after solid seasons last year, had the chance to level up. Excited to see that. But to keep your answers short, to keep it short and sweet for you, week 1's going to tell me what I need to see. I'd say 9-10 wins is the bare minimum. I'd like to see them go 10-2, as everybody would. But the schedule's daunting. It's a challenge, and it's going to be a fun one. It's going to be a fun year.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, like I said, Texas is the favorite for a lot of people in the conference, but after that, I think there's a bunch of different teams that can take claim at number 2 because I know Georgia's going to be the favorite for that, but I feel like they've got some questions, and LSU's a team that's got the talent to be one of the better teams. And this has been a lot of fun celebrating the LSU Tigers. I know everybody's going to say, man, you guys are high on them. And then, hey, hopefully they come back to this episode. So, man, you guys were on to something with the LSU Tigers when we get to the end of the season in 2025. But, Zach, again, appreciate the time. If the listener viewers will check out online, where can they find you?
Yeah, for me on my personal kind of Twitter or X, whichever one you want to call it, that's at ZNAGY20. Kind of pumping out some content on there on some off-season coverage. And then the LSU SI page is going to be at LSU Tigers SI. And that's where we're putting out a bunch of different content, whether it's football, baseball, basketball, recruiting, transfer portal buzz, you name it. Like I always say, man, if it's purple and gold related, we got it on the site. So make sure to check it out. We're entering a spot now where we're going to have some off-season coverage in the mix. Summer workouts for LSU starts over the summer in June. So we'll have some stuff for you. So make sure to check it out.
Absolutely. Everybody go check out Zach's work. And Zach, appreciate the time, and I look forward when we get to do this again.
Absolutely, my man. I appreciate you.
All right, everybody, that's going to do it for this edition of the Phillip Jordan Podcast. Once again, thanks to Bob Rose and Zack Nagy for being on the show. Really appreciate them coming on and talking New Orleans Saints. It's going to be interesting with the Saints, just seeing how this team progresses. No one's going to be predicting them to make the playoffs, but how competitive are they? How do we see this team grow, especially with a rookie quarterback and the aging veterans? How do they fit in all that? So it's going to be a very interesting team there. The South, the Falcons, we'll see what happens with them. Michael Penix taking over quarterback. Also with the Buccaneers, with Baker Mayfield, they're going to be a favorite there. And Carolina got better with Bryce Young last year. So we'll see what happens to them. And with LSU, look, as I said there, Texas is going to be the favorite, the team that most people are going to pick to win the SEC. Georgia's going to be 2. I know that. And a lot of people probably think I'm down on Georgia. Not necessarily down. I just felt they had more questions than in recent years. Alabama's going to be good. LSU is going to be good. We'll see where A&M is at in all this. Also, Tennessee, are they going to take a step back without Nico? So it's going to be an interesting league. South Carolina is going to get a lot of energy and attention. Lenore Sellers is a quarterback that is being talked about in mock drafts. Cover Auburn, we'll see. We'll see what happens with them as well. So it is going to be a very, very interesting year for LSU going into it between now and then. We'll see where they're picked on the SEC Media Days rolls around. All right, guys, I'm going to get out of here. Please check out my written work over at the Auburn Wire, obviously, where I cover Auburn athletics, along with the team there. And also, check out my work over at Last Word College Football, where I write about Alabama. And recently, I jumped back on with Wiregrass Daily News, just work for them on Saturday night, covering a local soccer team we have here in Dothan, the Dothan United Dragons. So I got some work over there as well. Check out the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Also on YouTube at Phillip Jordan Sports. We will not have. I'll say no. Let me walk that back. I don't know if there's going to be a podcast next week. I up in the air because I've been kind of getting a routine of recording these on Mondays for right now. I believe probably when we get in the season, football season, I probably might move that over to Tuesdays. But right now, until we get to football season, we're on Mondays right now. And of course, next Monday is a holiday. So I don't know if I'm going to do it or not. If I do one, it's probably, and it's on Monday, it will probably be a solo podcast, just going to just talk some stuff. If not, I might push to Tuesday. We'll just see. Also, may just play a best of. I got some interviews I haven't had you guys listen to. Some of you may have never listened to. So we may do a best of edition of the show as well. But just keep up with the socials and the feed. Find out if there's going to be one. And obviously, you can email me sportstalkfitjordan@gmail.com. And also follow me on social media, PJordanSEC. Everybody has a great, great rest of their week. Till next time. Bye-bye.